what you want to be doing as an investor, unless you want to be looking at your portfolios and rebalancing them every day, you want to be taking the long-term view. And that long-term view has to be predicated on the fact that these periods of geopolitical stress, market stress, recessions, now global pandemics even, all need to be just business as usual.
Chris, welcome to Forbes in Focus.
Wonderful to be here, Sarah.
You've been with Trobe Financial for 20 years. You were Chief Investment Officer for 7 of those years and became CEO in 2022. What was the biggest mindset shift you had to make when going from Chief Investment Officer to CEO?
It's just the sheer volume of diverse issues coming across the desk. It's the context shifting. So, could be thinking about people and technology, could be thinking about credit, could be thinking about finance. Maybe there's a thorny tax issue that we're reflecting on. You've got to move from one issue to another really, really quickly. It's the hardest part of the job. I won't deny it. It makes for a grueling day, but it also makes for an incredibly stimulating day. I get to deal with these incredible experts across the business in all of these disparate areas, and to be knitting that together into a coherent whole, keeping an eye on what matters, keeping the team focused on what are the big issues that we should be focused on, and just as importantly, what are the things that we've got to put to one side and come back to on another day.
What skill do you think is most underrated when it comes to leading an investment firm?
So an investment firm of this scale, Sarah, so we've got 20 billion in assets under management. There are so many things you've got to be across. I mean, global markets are dynamic, they're ever changing, there's always pressures there. Tech, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about what's going on with the evolution of artificial intelligence, how we'll iterate that into the business. They're all wonderful intellectual challenges for an investment manager. Still, despite what goes on in markets, despite what's happening in tech, it's still all about the people. So if I'm able to provide those folks with clarity as to what we're trying to achieve, to remind them of what our core values are, we have so many experts in so many disciplines across the business. They don't need me to tell them how to do their job. They need me just to knit the whole together. And I think that's the role of a CEO.
Yeah. You mentioned the AI evolution. What's the sentiment of the team and how are you managing that?
We're not finding any resistance at all. In fact, folks are really embracing it. It helps, I think, Sarah, that we're growing so quickly. So I certainly think as we grow, we probably won't need to add as many additional staff as maybe we once would have, but that's natural. And that's been a part of the story of Trobe Financial, certainly over the last 3 years. We're finding better ways, smarter ways to grow, rather than having to throw 400 people at every problem. Maybe we only need 20.
Yeah.
And that's the leverage that we're finding.
And just briefly before we move on from AI, ChatGPT, how are you using it yourself on a day-to-day basis?
I find it incredibly useful to solve the empty page problem. When you look at that blank page, you've got a speech coming up, you're writing a paper for the board, and you go, the blank page is always a challenge, particularly if you're addressing that blank page at the end of a long day. And it mightn't be the last word, but it certainly gets the rocket ship off the ground, doesn't it?
It certainly does, it certainly does. I want to move on to the current economy and the economic environment. It's worth probably noting that we are recording this in June 2025 because things are changing rapidly, but 2025 has been particularly turbulent. What are some of the signals that you're watching most closely for in the Australian economy?
So investors need to step out of that sort of panic, read the headlines, the world's all ruined sort of mindset. Chaos is not a good time. When times are really chaotic, that's not a good time to be making investment decisions. What you want to be doing is making really solid decisions in times of quiet that will drive your portfolios through those times of chaos. Given what's going on geopolitically, there is, I think, a strong argument that investors should be looking more defensively in their portfolios. Equities markets have run really strongly over the last few years in particular, and there is a strong case for investors to say maybe the good news has been well and truly priced in and the risks are maybe pointing to the downside. But again, what you want to be doing as an investor, unless you want to be looking at your portfolios and rebalancing them every day, you want to be taking the long-term view. And that long-term view has to be predicated on the fact that these periods of geopolitical stress, market stress, recessions, now global pandemics even, all need to be just business as usual.
Okay, volatility is the norm. Where are you seeing some of the opportunities for Australian investors right now?
private markets, private credit in particular, they are a wonderful place to get really strong returns that are uncorrelated to some of that market noise. Having said that, investors do need to be careful there too, because when something's the topic du jour, you will see new managers enter who may not have the track record and the discipline across the cycle. So you certainly need to be selective there. But having been in our space for over 7 decades, we've seen price shocks, we've seen periods of market panic, we've seen wars, we've seen pandemics, we've seen recessions. And all of the time we've been iterating, we've been improving, we've been adding what we've learned to the way we approach our asset classes. And I think that durability across the cycle that builds into a manager is an edge that just can't be replicated.
Can you tell me about one or two of your flagship products and who are they best suited to?
So the folks we target really for our investments are those who are approaching retirement or who are in retirement. Now we have lots of young people investing with us as well, which is terrific, but that's where our real strength is. So our 12-month term account, over 10 billion in assets under management, 11,500 loans across the country, diversified portfolio, all first mortgage secured, average loan to value ratio of 64%. That's been performing for investors like a metronome since 2002. So that's been an amazing part of our portfolios. More recently, we've launched a US private credit strategy. The opportunity for investors is first and foremost to diversify their sources of income away from just the Australian economy, which is after all less than 2% of the world economy. But it's to invest really in what you see in the US now really as a bipartisan policy, which is the rebuilding of Middle America. Most recently, we're just about to go live with our Trobe private credit fund, which is a listed fund, which is actually investing in both of those two underlying funds, and it's giving investors an opportunity to access a wonderfully blended, diverse source of income, and they can access that via the stock exchange. So, a wonderful way for investors to get exposure to both of those funds.
Yeah, so just on the latest one that you're listing maybe at the end of June, you raised 300 million for that. And as you mentioned, that's exposed to the US, the middle corporate market. How you obviously were watching volatility and what's happening over in the US to time it right, but you decided to go full steam ahead. So can you tell me around the decision-making process around the timing of this?
It is true that some of our advisors said to us about 6 weeks ago that maybe we should, put the pen in the pocket for a little while and just wait till later in the year. We talked to our investors though, and there was real appetite for that investment. And remember, as distinct to a lot of managers, we're dealing with an investor base of 115,000 who are already entrusting us with their life savings. So the way we thought about it, Sarah, was we wanted to make ourselves available for investors who prefer to invest on the stock market. And we backed our investors to really come in and support this. As it turns out, we were oversubscribed. We did the cornerstone raise in under 24 hours. So we were sort of overwhelmed with interest, which was wonderful. And it's wonderful to see. And in due course, at some point over the next 6 or 12 months, we'll be back into market and give more investors an opportunity to participate as well.
Just when you're talking about planning these to list extra funds, looking to the future, you are planning to grow La Trobe Financial from 20 billion to 55 billion in the next 5 years. What's the plan of attack?
In some ways, it's just the maths of the numbers. When you look at the rate of growth of the business, the new investments that are coming into the business. So we're seeing about 3 billion coming into our existing funds already, 3 billion a year in net inflows coming into our existing funds. We're deploying over 1 billion a month now in investable capital into our various strategies. So in some ways, there's the run rate, but we can also see an extraordinary growth opportunity ahead, Sarah, as we bring new products to these investors. We'll be launching a real estate strategy soon, an infrastructure strategy will follow later in the year. So we're going to have a range of strategies. We'll be doing more listed vehicles as well. So all of that's providing investors ways to deal with us in different markets, and it's providing us with the opportunity to serve different parts of investors' portfolios. Remember that the Australian investor is the world's second most wealthy. So, median household wealth in Australia is number 2. And so our investors are wealthy and they are aging. and they are looking for retirement-focused investment solutions. And there's not a lot of opportunities available in the Australian market. So we're seeing an enormous growth opportunity ahead of us. I mean, there's $4.4 trillion in the Australian superannuation sector. I mean, the amounts of money are staggering. So we have a lot of confidence about our growth plans and a lot of conviction about the role that La Trobe Financial can play in the portfolios of our investors.
So I want to go back to talking about you and how you're managing and leading the investment firm. So Blackstone bought La Trobe Financial in 2017 and then Brookfield bought it in 2022. Now it's been lined up to be sold again. You've been through all this. Tell me, what is it like now at the moment? Give me a bit of a day in the life and what it's like to go through this whole sale process.
It's very exciting, actually, Sarah. So, Brookfield at the moment are doing a strategic review. That may or may not end up in a sale, and we'll see. We'll go through the process. What does it mean for management? It means just for a moment you step out of the business and you check all of your disciplines and your hygiene. That's the first thing you do. You have the lawyers come through, you have the accountants come through, you have the tax advisors come through, and you check your hygiene. Is the plumbing right? Have you adapted to all the evolving regulation, all the evolving legislation in all of those areas? Is the business in a really strong, sound position? So that's the first thing. Then the second thing you do is you look at your strategy and you say, are we addressing the extraordinary opportunity for us? For us as a management team, what do we want to do? We want to take La Trobe Financial to its full potential. And that means from time to time you want to step out of the business and just have this moment to check and test and see, are we doing anything right? Is there anything we could be doing better? Is there anything more that we could and should be doing? So whether this process ends up in a sale or not, it's an incredible discipline for the management team. And I've got to say, we've done this a number of times in the past, this management team, and every time we've emerged stronger.
What keeps you awake at night? What is the most stressful part of it all?
So at a business level, you have all of the perennials. It's a very significantly heightened cyber risk environment. So that's an area of the business where you can never sleep easy on. You can never be complacent for a moment. I mean, obviously, you're always looking at opportunities for markets to turn haywire, to move one way or another. Our investors are counting on us to be looking ahead of the curve on all of that and to ensure our business is well prepared for those sorts of moments. There's evolving regulatory frameworks. You've got to make sure the business is keeping up with that and iterating each of those evolutions into the business, into the DNA of the business. I think there's a bigger sort of fundamental concern, though, that hopefully many Australians are sharing, which is, are we as a nation at the moment just do we have the appetite to compete? Are we trying to regulate risk completely out of the environment? Are we so focused on holding onto what we've got as individuals, as a society, that we're not building stuff for the next generation and the generation that comes after that, and all of those new Australians who come to this country looking to share in the amazing lifestyle we've built? And I think fundamentally for Australia, look, in the short to medium term, the outlook, the economy in Australia is performing really well versus most of the rest of the world. And, we say Australia's the lucky country, but the harder we work, the luckier we get, Sarah. And the question now, the fundamental question for Australia is, do we still have that hunger to grow the pie, to include more people?
So what's the one change you think needs to be made on a policy level in order to make sure that we are competitive on a global scale?
Yeah, so the fundamental issue is attitude. So that's the first thing. It's not one policy, it's an attitude. Are we trying to regulate all risk away? Are we trying to make it such that nothing can ever happen? Which is a good way of making sure nothing bad ever happens, but to make sure nothing good ever happens as well. The fundamental policy issue, by far the biggest policy issue here in Australia, the issue that has the potential really to polarise this country, is home ownership. Is there an avenue, a reasonable avenue, to home ownership for younger Australians? That's a really good example of what I was just talking about. The fundamental problem there is lack of supply of housing. And folks say it's complicated, but it's not that complicated if you're really motivated. If you really wanted to deliver housing, we know where the blockages are. We know there's issues around planning. We know there's issues around the supply of skilled labour and even raw materials post-COVID. We could address those if we really, really wanted to.
When you say attitude, it's hard to shift people's attitude. How do you think we go about that? Is that through the media, is it through government? Where does that start, shifting attitudes?
I think, the fundamental question every individual needs to ask individually. It's great to point the fingers at governments, but we get the governments we deserve, we get the governments we vote for. So it's about individuals actually asking themselves, what do they want their legacy to be? But are you, when you're going to the ballot box, are you valuing those issues which will actually create wealth as well as preserve risks? Why is productivity in Australia at the same level as it was in 2016? That makes no sense. Haven't we got better at anything in the last 10 years? Makes no sense at all. But that's something we should be all asking ourselves individually. We were talking earlier about AI. There's an opportunity to leverage AI to make us all more productive. What does more productive mean? It doesn't mean working longer hours. It means creating more with less.
No.
And that is something that we've probably lost focus on. You hear economists talking about it all the time, but I'm not feeling the resonance in our society at the moment. And that would be my challenge to our political leaders. Who is articulating that case?
Well, thanks very much, Chris. It's been absolutely lovely to be talking to you today.
It's terrific as always, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.